Leadership in my mind has always been very much about servant leadership, right?
Sure.
And it's very important. I didn't know that term until a few years ago, but I recognize that it describes the style that I think is important for anybody that's in a position that leads, particularly in a public organization, right? I mean, you're there for really only one purpose, and that is to make things better for other people. And while the job does impact you personally, it's also something that you have to fully recognize that you're there to help make the organization better. I mean, in the case of the mayor, you're there to make the community the very best that it can be.
You said something to the effect that you never saw yourself starting out your career and what you were doing as being a mayor one day.
Right.
So maybe we could start really there. When you were coming up through your early years and studying, what were your, personal aspirations? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yep. So, it's interesting. It didn't really dawn on me that I would want to be getting into politics in any way, shape, or form. But I guess had I had the perspective at that time that I now have today, and I had the opportunity to look back and see where I was really going, there would have been some clues. I did end up running and was successful in my grade 8 year at being the student council president. Which I didn't think much of course, at the time. And I have done lots of things throughout my growing up life that were, I suppose, leadership types of opportunities and serving in different ways and getting to know the community. And I've always really liked that. I've always been the person that if something was going on, I wasn't the person to stand back and be quiet about it, but I couldn't help myself but jump forward and see if I couldn't find myself in a leadership role to make things better.
So grade 8, right? Is that?
Yeah.
So you're sitting in grade 8. Go back and think, tell me, it wasn't a moment, okay, it's grade 8, so therefore I will run. You were probably having these thoughts, grade 7, you were watching the person who was the president at the time. Did you notice this kind of thing, or did it just land in your lap, or did somebody tell you about it? How did it exactly go?
I've actually given that some thought, and no, it wasn't like that. I always seemed to be able to lead in a subtle way. I didn't mean to do it. It just kind of happened. I mean, people would follow my lead in school, and when that all came up in elementary school, I don't remember the details of it. It was a long time ago, but I remember thinking, well, I would be a good person to lead this initiative, and so I put my name forward, and I had lots of people that wanted to help me to get elected, so to speak, and it's been like that pretty much every single time since that time.
So when you got into being school president or student council president, do you have any idea what it entailed?
No.
Okay.
Not in grading. I mean, it was, in a lot of ways, the 13 or whatever it is, year-old mind, I don't think really works in the same way as it was later.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
But you had a plan, you studied it.
It's one of those things where I think I've always felt, without actually being necessarily very conscious of it, that I was going to be the person that would help to move things along, and I love working with other people, and leadership in my mind has always been very much about servant leadership, right?
Sure.
And it's very important. I didn't know that term until a few years ago, but I recognize that I think it describes the style that I think is important for anybody that's in a position that leads, particularly in a public organization, right? I mean, you're there for really only one purpose, and that is to make things better for other people. And while the job does, impact you personally, it's also something that you have to fully recognize that you're there to help make the organization better. I mean, in the case of the mayor, you're there to make the community the very best that it can be. And I do feel very passionate about my community, and that passion has grown from it being just a place where I lived to my home. And we have roots here. We love this community. I love how far we've come, and I love the prospect of where we're going to go. And I wanted to be a part of that. And you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the people who you represent. And there's lots and lots and lots of good people that are with you on that journey along the way, right? Including, in my case, my members of council, community supporters, and members of the community who don't always agree with us.
Sure.
We're all on the same journey, and And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, is make our community the best that it can be.
Well, it's a lot of the same parallel. I mean, going back to the student council president, I mean, you had people who wanted to run for the same position. After, you won that role, they were still there as part of school. They were still part of the people who you looked out for.
Yep.
When you've ever stepped into leadership roles before this one here, even starting with that one, did you discover after, okay, I guess I'm the leader now. Yeah, okay, I'll get to work. What were, from your earliest recollections, the challenges you noticed you kept facing as a leader over and over again? What was like, what do you recall?
Well, I mean, leading the larger and more diverse the organization that you're trying to lead, the more complicated the role becomes, of course, right?
Right.
And I know that, when I was president of a professional organization, Professional Photographers of Ontario, actually, which was a trade organization that I was involved with, we were all pretty much, working in the same direction for the most part. But there's still, within that group, there were still lots of different opinions on how we get there.
Right.
But if you compare that to like a city, there are very infinite numbers of different opinions and directions and ways of doing things. But I think the commonality is that we all want the same things out of life on a very basic, element. I mean, we want the community to be safe. We want the community to be clean. We want the community to be a dynamic place to raise a family or to run a business. And those are the commonalities that we need to always remember, both as elected officials and leaders in the community, but also as members of the public, right? There's obligations on the members of the public's part to make sure that they're conscious of, what it is do they want out of the elected officials to create the things that we all need in our community. I know that's very simplistic, but I find that very exciting to be able to know that there are commonalities that no matter where you're from, no matter who you are, no matter what age you are, we're all pulling in the same direction.
So the challenge would be taking in all this feedback from everybody, again, even going back to those days, the early days. I think we should do this. I think we should do this. I think we should do this.
Yep.
And so when you were doing this from your even your earlier roles as leaders, and we'll get to the mayor part as well, but I'm really curious because I really would love for me to understand. I've talked to you a little bit about how I study and look at leaders like yourselves, and I thought, was it always like that? Were you always thinking? Were you always feeling the same, the challenges that you were facing? So when you were going back to those days, even back in public school, wherever it was, how did you sit there and manage to say, well, we're going to end up doing this. We're going to end up doing this. Like, how did you do it?
Well, I think that's actually an interesting question. I think, I always wish that I was older when I was younger.
Yeah.
And had the wisdom, that I have at the moment, which I'm sure won't be as much wisdom as I have in a number of years from now. But when I've started out in leadership roles, I mean, a lot of those roles were not as deeply understood as I would understand them today. You're the leader in the community, and that means something to you personally, and that's that's a bit of an ego thing. But I think
there's nothing wrong with feeling good.
No, there isn't. Absolutely not. But I think as you get older, you start to realize that part of the personal fulfillment that you get in a leadership position is that you are making good things happening for your fellow citizens, for the people who are around you. And that to me is really a real kick. And I think you'll find that most leaders that are in public office, like myself, that has to be a part of how they feel, or they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. This job isn't always as glamorous as it might appear to be, and knowing that you've done good things for the community is a good thing. And further to what you're saying before, I reflect on some of the more difficult decisions that we've made on council that throughout my time as a leader in a municipal level. A lot of times, the disagreement isn't necessarily a disagreement on the end result; it's a disagreement on how to get there.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's important to understand, is that, again, getting back to, we all really want the same things.
Right.
And it's a matter of, do we take this road to get there, or do we take this road to get there? and people will have definite opinions about that. And it's exciting to be able to bring people together to help them to understand and be on the same page that, we are all trying to get to the same place. It's just a matter of, how we get there.
I think I couldn't agree with you more when you see, even if it's something like in other leadership roles, it was about organizing events, for example. Now you're organizing the city.
Right.
But nevertheless, when you see it all come together at certain milestones, at certain moments, you're like, hey, that was great to be a part of.
Yeah.
And to bring this all together. And it could be something, like significant, like a change in policy, or the results of funding coming in for a group of people that really, really needed it, or a park bench that invites people to come and together, right? Like that, it's all part of it.
Absolutely.
And you celebrate all of these wins. So as you were kind of growing up, and you said you didn't make much of it, right? Because right after that, you said you wanted to get into photography.
Yeah.
At a public school or high school, you said, why? Like, well, made you want to be a photographer?
I was interested in photography, like so many people are, for a really long time. So I, got quite inspired about that, and I spent $100 and bought a camera and a couple of lights, and it kind of grew from there. So the first wedding that I ever photographed, my dad had to drive me to because I wasn't 16 yet. And I told him, I said, just park a long way away. I don't want them to know I'm that young.
Yeah, right.
But it was good. I mean, in that, you're running your own business. I mean, I was running that business as a hobby.
Sure.
For a long time when I was really young. But my wife and I went to a conference in the States about photography. She tagged along, and she had a good job at IBM. And I remember one night she said to me, she says, yeah, I'm going to quit my job when I get home and work full-time at the business. You're going to quit your job. I was a teacher at that time.
Okay.
And we'll both run the business. And it was very uncharacteristic of Michelle, my wife, to say that, but for some reason it just resonated, and we did it, and we ran a very successful and very rewarding business. We met so many great people over the years, shared so many of their life moments with them. And it really was an incredibly enriching experience. I'm not running that business anymore. I just don't have the time, but it was a really wonderful part of my life. And I think that really, being a leader in a business and leading employees and leading folks when you're working with them as clients was a very good opportunity.
What were you teaching?
I taught grade 5. Actually, I taught grade 5, and then at the last year that I knew I was going to be winding down the teaching career and starting full-time in photography, I taught kindergarten. And that was actually something I promised myself going to teachers college I would never do, because I didn't want to have anything to do with really little kids like that. But it was the most fun experience I've ever had. It was a lot of fun, guiding those little folks and hearing the things that they say on a daily basis.
Well, I mean, it's interesting now. I see the parallels. So like even teachers, if there's two professions that are like, to me, the most highly respected, teachers are one, and the healthcare givers, nurses are, to me, the two of those to me rank the highest there. But teachers, so it starts making sense that you're out there, you've been teaching, looking for the development of these others, and there's a lot of reward aside from you could be doing other things with time, but seeing them, the students, and especially when they're grade 5, you see them later come back or come around, or when you run into them again, and then they remember you, and they're like, hey, Mr. West, I had a great time in your class. And
yeah, actually that happened to me the other day. I paid by credit card. My name was on the credit card, and a student that I had in my very first year, recognized me, and I actually remember him very, very well. But I think it's funny. The thing is with teaching is that I think I was a pretty good teacher, but I think I always looked up at that time and really look up to teachers now who have done it for a number of years, because the wisdom teachers have at that age that they can always give back to so many kids is really amazing, and it's an incredible job. I have a number of family members that are teachers, and the ease at which they seem to be able to do a fantastic job, and I know that they're working very hard, but they look so comfortable in doing that, and they know what to do and how to really reach young people. And I mean, how many of us in our lives have can remember moments in our education where some teacher made a significant difference in our lives, and I really admire that. I still admire that today.
Even the teachers that we might not remember, that we didn't think made that significant, impact on our life. It's interesting, as a teacher and even as a mayor, like you got these people, like your students, your constituents, you're serving them. Some of them, probably more often than not, some of them will come to you and say, hey, here's an apple or thank you. But most of them will come in and come out.
Yep.
And as much as you're delivering value, they're not going to go out of their way necessarily to say, hey, great job. Nor will their parents necessarily come up to you because they're busy. They're doing what they're doing. But gosh, if there's a little thing that goes wrong, everyone seems to show up. It's like there's a lot of parallel there.
I think that's probably true to some extent. I think my experience when I was teaching, though, is that if you kept your eyes open, you could always see the appreciation that the kids had on a daily basis. And oftentimes the parents too. I mean, I think parents are busy and they're reacting to things that they're not happy about more so than they're reacting to things that they are happy about. But I think if you look carefully, you can see, you're doing a good job and that people are appreciating what you're doing. I mean, the same goes with being in politics sometimes too, right? I think you have to be confident enough in your ability to know you're doing the right thing and that you're not looking for the thank yous necessarily, but if you keep your eye open, you can see them there in subtle ways.
True. So had Michelle not said this, you could still be a teacher. Doing photography. Like when you were a teacher, were you looking into the future saying, this is what I'm going to do next, or you were enjoying being the teacher?
I was enjoying the teaching, but I was really, really enjoying the photography. And while I went to teachers college, I was doing the photography. And while I was, the first few years that we were married, I was doing more and more of it. And the teaching was I enjoyed it, but the photography was my passion, and it was what I wanted to do, and it was what really gave me a great deal of pleasure, more so than the teaching, which I loved that job, but it was this passion, and it was also the excitement of doing something on your own, right? Like not working for anybody, and when my wife Michelle decided to join me in this, it was a team effort, and we ran that thing very passionately for many years. And while my son was growing up, we had a boy at some point during that whole process. It really became, like so many family businesses, a real family effort, right?
So as a photographer too, now I mean, this is another area that complements and brings you into the role. Like you now develop that eye, right, to see angles, to look at people, to notice things about them, whether it's their, what's going on physically, but even sometimes probably you pick up on emotion just by looking at them and try to capture that into your photograph. So you develop the eye.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things, we specialized in people photography, and I think that's a natural thing for me. I love dealing with people. I love talking to people. And I certainly never thought this would lead anywhere. But I think looking back on it,
right,
being with people at some of their emotional and intimate times in their life, right? They're getting married. They're, having an event like a communion or a bar mitzvah or something like that. You're with the family at a moment where they're themselves and they are counting on you to record that event in a very respectful way. I mean, it's really a great deal of trust. And I think looking back on that, and I certainly didn't recognize this as that at the time, but it was a very important moment in my growing up as a person to be able to recognize, these people for who they are, and to really understand people on a really good level. Because as an elected official, these are the people in your community that you're representing, and these are the things that are, the things that are important to people. It's important that we all recognize that as community leaders.
So there's leadership, there's servitude, there's passion, there's trust, and all of these things are really starting to come together in your life, and all without necessarily there being this intention that I'm going to get into politics.
Yeah.
Because you could have gone and studied poli-sci.
Yeah.
And you could have studied law, and like so many of the other sort of pathways that lead into community service and civil service and, and leadership that you see around you, probably in others that have been in your roles or others around you. So then, was it Michelle that said, okay, you're going to do, or where did it start coming up that you started noticing, what's going on in this community? And this matters to me, and I want to say something about it.
Yeah.
How did that evolve?
Well, so I there was an opportunity to take over for a councillor that had.
How did you know about that?
I was actually becoming a little bit more politically active through being the chair of the Board of Trade, being on the Government Affairs Committee at the Board of Trade, and getting to know the workings of the city. And I found it fascinating, right?
So you joined the Board of Trade as a photographer, right?
That's right.
For your photography
as
business.
a business. Yeah.
Okay, so that was was that the beginning of it?
It was. And again, I didn't recognize that at the time. I became the Government Affairs Committee chair. Again, I'm not really sure how that happened, but it did.
Right.
And so I was dealing a little bit more closely with councillors and with the council and other levels of government as well. Right. And that was certainly a part of the growing that got me to wanting to become a member of council. But when the opportunity to take over for a member of council that was retiring came up, I put my name forward, and there was a whole bunch of people that did, and the council picked me to be the replacement for the year. And then I ran in the election, and I've run ever since. But at the time, I wasn't sure whether that's really what I wanted to do. But it was something that I felt a responsibility, because I felt that I needed to do it in order to give back in the way that I needed to give back to the community. And, I did have a vision of what I wanted the community to be like, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to be a positive part of that. And, my wife and son were very supportive of that at the time, and have been very supportive ever since. And I think, both of them also share a real passion for the community as well. And that's really important to me, to know that there's, when the going gets tough, my family is there to support the vision that we all share. And, that's I don't know how you do this without a supportive family, but that's just me.
Yeah. That Government Affairs Committee, I tell you, when I first heard about that Government Affairs Committee, I was thinking, keep that as far away from me as, I joined the Board of Trade, and it's great for, networking and meeting these other businesses and giving back, helping these other businesses in the community. And you hear about the Government Affairs Committee, and I would hear, as you sit on the board, you hear reports coming out of the Government Affairs Committee, and I was like, my first reaction, to be honest, was like yawn, like, what are they doing over there, spending hours talking about things?
Yeah,
that was my first reaction, to be honest. But then I started thinking that why would people spend this much time, go through this much, effort? For seemingly no result? Like, what's the result over there?
Yeah.
So when you came out of being a photographer, and honestly, a photographer, if your passions are strong in photography, you are an artist. You're an artist.
Yeah.
Versus here, where there's a lot of structure, you do it this way, you can and you can't.
Yeah.
Did you feel that transition at first? Like, did you feel it, that moving into the Government Affairs Committee couldn't have been that, like, organic? Yeah, I fit right in here. This is how it...
Well, I think, being the chair of the Government Affairs Committee, it was, again, leading my fellow businesses that were members of the Board of Trade to have a better business environment in Richmond Hill. Okay. But the one thing about the Richmond Hill Board of Trade, Chamber of Commerce that it was called at the time, was that they were very much of it was a business organization, and still, they still are like this, but it's very much a community organization. Like, they build a great community for businesses to thrive in. And I've always been very inspired by that. It's not just a business organization. And I guess when you look at the work that the Government Affairs Committee does at the time, and still does, I think, and you distill down whatever the policy is that you're talking about, it's still all about making the community better, right? It's making the community better for businesses. It's making the community better for the people that live here.
But you're not doing it through photography anymore.
No,
you're doing it through
Yeah, but again, that's maybe an extension of, it's just another way to help, right? And I always really enjoyed that experience. The other thing I found really inspiring about that is that you're not being a dictator and making this happen because this is the way you think. It's listening to the other members of the committee, listening to the needs of the constituents who in that case are your fellow businesses in the city, and making it better for everybody. And it's the same that I also find that very inspiring, and I find that inspiring in my job today and every other leadership organization that I've ever been a part of, is that it's really great to be able to work with equally passionate people. And my ideas are not necessarily always the best ideas. Maybe they get the conversation started, but we'll often end up in a place that's even better. And it's better because you're listening to the other people that are around you. And, you know, in the position that I'm in now as mayor, I mean, I have a very great staff. I mean, across the entire corporation. I mean, I always joke with people that any answer you want on any subject is known somewhere in the organization. You just have to find the person that knows the answer.
Right.
The elected colleagues that I have on council are doing a great job right now, and you know, we're doing a really good job, I think, in having discussions that are passionate and sometimes not in the same road that we're going to get there, but eventually we work it out because, you know, it's a respectful conversation. We respect that, you know, everybody has good ideas, and we just need to, you know, filter them out, put them together, and then come up with the plan that reflects all those ideas. And that's not the leader's job. Isn't necessarily to say, well, this is how we're doing it.
Yeah.
The leader's job is to say, okay, everybody, you're all here for a reason. You're all here for the same reason, to make the community better. How do we do that most efficiently? And we put all those ideas together.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, sitting now on the Government Affairs Committee, and finally they finally reached out and said, "Hey, you want to do this?" And after a whole bunch of hawing and humming, I finally said, "Let's give it a shot."
They finally got you.
And yeah, and it was my first meeting there, we were actually looking over all of these resolutions that were going to be sent out to the I think it was Ontario or Canadian Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
And it was a 2.5-hour meeting. And I said to them, I said, is this like how you initiate the new guys?
Yeah.
But when I saw there had to be dedication there.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just people on the Board of Trade. There were councillors there. There were other people from other parts of the community that come together on this committee.
Yeah.
And I like the level of admiration and respect I have for these guys. I was like, wow, look at the work that they're doing. It's not very seen. Like you said, it's not very glamorous all the time. There's actually a lot of there's some tough, like, you know, mind work. But while you're doing that, you're not doing photography, right? Like you said, you're very passionate about it. So at some point in time, like you said, when the role of the counselor comes up and you apply, there had to be this awareness in you going, if I do that, I'm going to have to let go.
Yeah.
How did you reconcile that when you were making that move?
Well, it was hard because, I mean, letting go of something you love to potentially jump into the unknown and do something that you think you're going to love as much or more,
right,
is, you know, it's always a little bit, what's the unknown, right?
Yeah, everyone loves the photographer,
exactly.
But not everybody gives kudos to the guys in council.
Yeah, but I think, you know, I was fortunate enough to have run the business for such a long time. I mean, I started very young. It seems to me today, in looking back, kind of the natural progression. I did not recognize that at the time necessarily, but it was a progression from one thing to the other thing. And, you know, I think we're lucky in life when we're able to successfully do that. And I have been very fortunate in that and other, you know, transitions that I've made in my life that, you know, they seem like big changes at the time, but I don't think they were as big a change looking back. As they would have, because I think that all of the things that came before were good training for what came next in this particular case. So the jump from one to the other, it wasn't as big a leap as it might have seemed at the time.
I call them chapters, you know, like chapters in your book. Like you've had a really good chapter teacher, good chapter photographer. And you know, when you're writing your chapters, there's a beginning and there's an end to the chapter. So what's the next chapter? And this, like you call it, the progression and the transition into what you're doing.
Yeah.
But as you were going into that, now, I mean, some blunt questions, right? So did you ever feel, I mean, it might have been said to you directly, or you might have just felt it, that you don't belong here, man. You're a photographer, you're a teacher. We've come from, you know, poli-sci. We understand the workings of a city. Yeah, you've sat on GET committee, but what are you doing here? You're out of your place. You're out of your realm. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's interesting. There's different ways to get to be a politician, and you're right. I mean, people that are poli-sci, politicos, that are really interested in that. That's one way.
Because they had the passion for that.
Absolutely. And a lot of times lawyers or people that are in business are there. But I guess the thing is, I've never felt that way, and I've thought about it, but I think the reason is that I was a successful business owner. I spoke this morning, actually, to a business conference that we were hosting at the city, and I completely relate to all of the things that these attendees at this conference are there for, because they're learning to be better entrepreneurs. I understand that. Running a business, I think, was an incredibly important part of my life, and running a business that was a small business on my own, with my family, was whether, we're not counting on anybody else, it's us. That was a good part of it. And all the people skills that I learned in my past life as a photographer, those all lead me to what I think are the most important thing in my role today, and that is people. I mean, all of the other stuff is important, but it's the dealing with and understanding and being compassionate to the needs of the community really is the bottom line. I mean, there is nothing else in my mind that's more important to that. And I even felt at the time, I'm pretty well equipped with all the experiences that I've had in my life to be able to do that. But I think that's something that we sometimes miss in politics now, right? Is that understanding, with all that's going on in Canada right now and in the States especially, like, it's all drama, but it really isn't. It's what makes the news, but it isn't the bottom line, what's going on in your community on the ground. We visited Queen's Park yesterday, and I have a lot of admiration for people that serve at a provincial and federal level, because that's a whole other level of complicated leadership. Right. But my passion has always been right at the ground floor, because you're dealing directly with the person that phones you up that they forgot to pick up their garbage. You're dealing with the person that says there's a bylaw infraction somewhere in town. You're dealing with people's concerns about traffic and the environment, and these are all things that are happening like right there. They're not happening in some other place in the country or in the world. They're happening right where I live, and that's what I find most passionate. And I think most people who love people and love their community are fully equipped to be able to do this job. And those are the kinds of, when we talk about people participating in a local democracy or young people getting involved, you don't need a special set of skills to start out, being a servant leader and leading in different parts of your community. Most people have that toolkit,
It's really interesting to hear you say that. And you're at the top level of what you're doing. Because we come from maybe a generation where it's about qualification. It's about, having their certificate. It's about, and those are important things, because they developed, you learn certain specifics, and you develop that discipline the way those students learn to develop it. So yes, there's importance to that, but I'm hearing you say, if I'm understanding you, that you can come from any walk, so long as you have, and they used to call these things, and I think they still call them soft skills or the intangibles, right? But they seem to be very present there. And then you add compassion into the other things, that's like, passion, trust, servitude. And you come up with a person who's not just seeing themselves as qualified, but who's also probably got people behind them that are saying, no, actually, this person cares.
Yeah.
And caring is like, like one of probably the front running qualities.
I think that's really important. I mean, politicians don't know all the answers to all the questions. I mean, even the ones with the poli-sci degree. No, right? I have a specific set of things that I find very interesting. I was always very passionate in university about anything that had to do with natural science and the way the world, the environment works and all that kind of stuff. So I know a lot about that kind of stuff, and I'm very, very specifically interested in those types of things. But we're not expected to know everything about everything. And I'm, getting back to the quality of the staff that we have in the city of Richmond Hill, I find it fascinating to have the opportunity to sit in a room and talk to somebody about the functioning of a stormwater pond. Yeah. I had no idea that was so complex and complicated. And the people that are doing that work in the city of Richmond Hill are passionate about that subject.
Yeah, they care for the environment. They care for,
waste. I was joking at Regional Council the other day that we had a tour of an energy from waste facility that we have in York Region, and I mean the chemistry and the systems that go into disposing of our waste in different forms of waste is actually really fascinating. But I don't need to know all the answers to that, because we have people that do, and they will give us good policies that we then have to look at and say, well, is this policy from these experts good for our community? And knowing the people and knowing the community is the part that politicians at this level really need to know. We become well versed at a lot of different subjects, but we don't have to be specifically trained with a university degree in microbiology in order to make decisions about that, right?
Well, I mean, I think that's something to be said there. You get a first-hand look. You're invited into the discovery moments by the experts. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people don't get that invitation. They're sort of just hearing about it, or never even know that facet of the city exists, like you just talked about, like all the science that goes into it and all the expertise that are involved that come together. It wasn't some sort of haphazard decision made by whoever's nephew or whatever. I think that's important for people to know. But you couldn't have been the first and only person that moved into being councillor without any challenge. So what were the challenges along the way as you were making your first transitions into being councillor? Like, what was the first moments you're like, oh man, I didn't see this coming. Yeah. This is a little bit tough for me.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, councillors are asked to make difficult decisions all the time. And it's a glorious moment, but it's rare when there's a decision that we make that's truly good for the community. It's an important decision for the community, and every single person agrees with you. We cherish those moments when they happen, but it doesn't happen all that often. But I think the thing that needs to be firmly held on to is are you making the decision in the best interest of the community? And is it the best decision we can make, right? And, it's a big responsibility. But I think as politicians, we need to be courageous enough to stand up and do the homework, make sure you've done all the due diligence that you possibly can before an important decision like that is being made. And the question is this best for the community? And if the answer is yes, then it's probably a good decision. But yeah, politicians make difficult decisions all the time. And, I think they need to be made with honesty. You need to, do your homework and make sure that the decision is being made in a way that really is the best decision that it can possibly be. But listen, there's all kinds of challenges. And, Rich...
Give me one, for example. Like, what's the real struggle? What do you struggle with? Or what did you struggle with at first?
Yeah. It's interesting in the 10 years that I've been on council, that the struggles have changed, right? Richmond Hill right now is a community that's very much coming into its mature state, right? Sure. And we are, as the late Dave Barrow used to say, we are building a city in a town, right? And I've always loved that saying because that's what we're doing. We're trying to maintain and protect our established communities and all the things that make Richmond Hill great, and build new, more dense and transit-oriented communities along our transit corridors. And in a lot of ways, we're lucky to have that opportunity, that we have Yonge Street going right up our spine.
Yes.
But right now, the affordable housing, or housing that's affordable to more people, is really important. I mean, there are so many of us in the community that are going to need housing that's more affordable than what's offered right now. And we are in a real housing crisis right now. And it's a big problem, and it needs to be attacked with a lot of partners and a lot of different and unique things that we've maybe never done before. So overarching, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face now in our community and other communities in Richmond Hill as well. But at the same time that we're doing that, there's all kinds of other related matters that we have to look out for too. Not the least of which is the environment, right?
Right.
I mean, we've got to make sure that we, maintain a great natural environment. And frankly, in Richmond Hill, I've always thought that, given that we have got this, gift from Mother Nature of the Oak Ridges Moraine, there are areas on the moraine that we have cordoned off as not developable, and they need to continue to be in the state that they're in right now, or even an improved ecological state, to produce the kinds of benefits that we need as a community. And they're not fringe benefits. They're, benefits that really protect us, from flooding, protect us from the effects of climate change, clean our water, and really importantly, give us a place where we can go and recreate. And we're very lucky in Richmond Hill. We have more than our share of really beautiful natural spaces where you can totally get away and feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. So all of those things are happening. We have an aging community. This gray hair, I'm not dyeing it gray. It's just happening.
I look pretty good.
I know, thanks.
They're trendy.
But I think that, we have an aging community, and that aging demographic is going to put challenges and opportunities probably at our doorstep that we need to make sure that we address properly, right? So,
do you ever feel now sitting there as mayor, and it's funny, I ask you about your struggle, you talk about the struggle of the city, and they're almost like synonymous, those are struggles of the city. But in your role now as you're sitting, your direct struggle, so I imagine one of them is obviously creating consensus and the others, right? One of the struggles I imagine might be that because there's municipal, then there's impact on what provincial law has already decided that impacts, or federal that impacts locally. There must be some type of, I don't want to call it frustration, but maybe that's the right word, that you want to do something, but it's outside of your, this is coming from somewhere else, and that's the wave that's taken. Do you ever run into that?
Yeah, I do. And without getting partisan.
Sure, yeah.
The provincial and federal governments are, it's the same taxpayer that funds it. And we're all pulling in the same rope.
Right.
We are. All of the things I said are important from a municipal point of view to make lives better for people. I'm sure that both provincial and municipal leaders feel the same way. I know they do. And in fact, I know they do because I've spoken.
For sure.
And again, in fairness, it's how do we get there? But one of the things that I think in the context of Richmond Hill, I'll only speak for that, but I will speak for other, because I'm part of the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus, and a lot of communities feel the same way. We are well equipped in municipalities to deliver the services that people need every single day that are foundational to our lives. And we know how to do it. In fact, we know how to do it better than any other level of government. And I think there's a real need in Canada that we really need to trust. Each level of government needs to trust the other levels of government to do the best thing that they do. And once they've provided the resources that are necessary to get out of the way. And I think in Richmond Hill, we have a very, very good understanding of the things that our residents need and precisely how they need it. And cities, I think in Ontario at least, and maybe other places too, are not necessarily given the jurisdiction to meet all of the challenges that we have. The expectations are there that we will be able to meet those challenges, but there are
the expectations coming from your constituents,
right,
as well as the other levels of government.
Somebody said to me the other day, and I love this, that in municipal life, and this sums up a councillor or mayor's life quite well. The federal government has all the power, the provincial government has all the money, and we have all the problems.
Right.
And I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but people will phone me up as the mayor, and phone other councillors as well about things that we have zero jurisdiction, immigration issues. Right. For whatever reason, they don't know who to call.
Right.
So the person that's closest to the ground, that person that they know they can trust, is, the mayor.
Right.
And so the mayor will get the phone call. And I would love to be able to help them. I mean, not that immigration is a municipal matter. I mean, that's not a good example, but we need the funding, we need the jurisdiction to be able to take care of all of the things that we're asked to take care of. And, and with reasonable strings, I suppose, but with essentially no strings attached. And we can then create municipalities that truly reflect the uniqueness that our constituents expect, right? Like, our municipality is different than any other municipality in Ontario, and that's a good thing, right? I mean, it's good that we're not the same as Kenora, we're not the same as Vaughan, we're not the same as Aurora, and they are all great communities.
Right.
But
they have their challenges and they have their opportunities.
And it amazes me when I attend a leaders conference from municipalities across the province or Canada. There is a lot that ties us together and is commonalities. We could always find something in common. I had lunch with the mayor of Gander, Newfoundland the other day, and it was a fascinating conversation. And there's a lot of the same things that are common between us and Gander, Newfoundland, but there's also the context and the details of that are different. And that's good. We want places to be different. We want people in Ontario and in Canada to have different communities that they can live and with different characteristics. And that's a good thing.
You've been a member of the municipal government now for a number of years. You were a councillor. I remember you would be serving on the GAC committee, actually, in that role while you're councillor, and then you moved into being mayor. Over this time, you've seen change. Has the nature of the job itself changed, or is it just like, what has changed?
The temperature on politics has definitely risen in this job. There's no question about that.
What does that mean, the temperature?
The willingness for people to say things that they might not say in person, right? I mean, you'll get posts on
political correctness, you mean? Am I saying it right? Or
I guess maybe that's part of it. But I mean, comments are made on social media now without really spending a great deal of time vetting what they're saying. And I see a lot of comments that I think are quick to anger, right? And that's too bad, because it doesn't help the political discourse along. Again, we're all pulling on the same rope in the same direction. There really needs to be a great deal of respect to make sure that all voices are heard and so on. But social media has provided
yes,
it's become very much more of a thing between the time I was first elected on council and now.
Well, you can watch it on YouTube now.
Right. It's a great opportunity because it helps us to get the word out. It
yes.
allows me to tell my constituents all the things that we're doing on a daily basis. But at the same time, it also isn't necessarily always the best forum to discuss a more complex issue, right? Nothing is black, nothing is white in municipal politics. Everything is gray. And we need to be able to communicate those subtleties of gray, right? Yeah. And there's value in social media, but it's not always the best vehicle to do it all on its own. And I think that's why it's important that we are getting out the message in different forms. It's a very fractured communication environment now, but we need to keep up with that and make sure that we're doing our due diligence and allowing our citizens to know everything that they need to know about being an active participant in their community. So yeah, it's a different environment now, and I'm sure it'll become different as time goes on. I mean, we're at a very quickly evolving, time.
I was at a conference and spoke to a former mayor of another city, and he was giving a talk on something completely different. And then he said, in one part of it, he said, I was about to stand for my next term, but I knew, even though there was all the support to do it, and he's the incumbent, that he would come in, but he decided not to. He says, I couldn't do another term, and I knew that. And then he kept on going. And so I went up to him after. I said, "What did you mean by that? Because you're saying compassion, all these things, the love for the community, the people, and the longer that you do it, the more you realize the need, right?
Yeah,
for serving, the need for the community. It's undeniable. So I was wondering, what would then take a person from realizing that need, right? And it's always the next chapter, right? So why would the next chapter be not standing again and serving again? When I asked him about it, it's like, he talked about he's like, no, it would break me. And I said, come on, what do you mean? And he says, well, and then he really opened up about the stress that it actually put on him. And I look at you having to deal with things that you can't deal with, things that are outside of, like you said, all of these things that are coming down the pipe, this way, that way, the other way. There's your family, there's your health, there's all of these things that you're trying to balance. Then on top of all that, you go and make a speech. And I got to say, you're sitting there cool as a cat, making jokes to the community and keeping them in that uplifted spirit. It takes a toll on the person. And this guy said, "Hey, I knew I wouldn't be able to pull another term."
Mm-hmm.
Is the stress that, like, it's real?
It is, and
How do you
yeah.
deal with it?
Kudos to that person, because I mean, self-awareness is really important,
Yes.
right? And this is a very important job, and I love it. But I think at the end of the day, people need to do what's best for them, because we talk a lot about mental health issues and the stress and everything, and knowing what your limits are, I think, are really important. And at the end of the day, I mean, I've heard many times, oh, you need to have a thick skin. No one has a thick skin. I mean, you
don't have a thick skin?
No, I don't.
You take things to heart sometimes?
You do, because you're doing this out of a real...
you're a human being, right?
Exactly. And you're doing it out of passion. You're giving your all to this. And if you are giving your all to this, there are things that are going to get through your skin. Having said that, if you're doing the right thing and you've done your homework and you've done it in the right way and you're confident that you're doing the best thing you can, that really helps you to get through the day, right? I mean, the good days are great. The bad days aren't so great sometimes, but you're still, if you've done the right thing, then it really helps. But I think that, I'm concerned to hear that type of story. And I've heard that story before, because, we have young people that a lot of times I hear feel very alienated from this system. And not just young people, but people look at this and say, well, I don't want to have to subject myself to that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Those are good people that could bring a good perspective to the table, that maybe are being discouraged because of what they see going on.
Absolutely.
Happening. And that's not good for us. That's not good for our democracy. So I am very concerned about that. We went through a period in Richmond Hill in the last term of council that was very difficult and very stressful, and there was a lot of upheaval.
Sure.
And the voters changed the composition of this council significantly. And the very first thing I did when we started was meet with everybody and make sure we're on the same page, that we're going to be respectful. We're going to be listening to each other. We're going to be not afraid to bring counter ideas to the table and debate them thoroughly and passionately.
Yeah.
I got everybody to sign a pledge that, put that in writing, that we were going to act in a way that the public could be very proud of. And I think we've been very, very successful in that. And I'm very proud of that. And I'm so far very proud of my council for really, it's not just me, it's everybody. I mean, I'm providing some leadership, but everybody else is working hard at that. And that's really important, because I don't want people ever to feel unwelcome or feel hesitant to come to council and air a view that's respectful but completely contrary to what we're proposing to do, because we want everybody to participate, and I want young people to participate. I mean, whenever I look at the council, I mean, it's important that we listen to diverse voices. We look in culturally, but also from an age perspective. We need more young people at the table, and women actually is another one, right? I've heard from a lot of women that are not particularly enthusiastic about getting their both feet into politics, because it's raucous, right. And they're not interested in doing that. And that's a barrier that 50% of the population perhaps, feels is something that it's a barrier for them to participate, and that's not good.
It's reassuring to hear that there are concerns that somebody like you has, that you want to see things happen. A lot of times, I was just joking with you the other day, saying sometimes when people look at a mayor, they think you show up at events, you take pictures, and you wear that cool badge. Yes, that cool badge with the pictures, and you're doing this, and that's really what goes on. You guys get around, you talk about some things, and it's cushy.
Yeah,
it's how it looks.
Yeah,
but I think that's just how you wear it.
Mm-hmm.
And you present it, and I think that's the thing, is on one hand you're one who encourages people to come forward and participate, and you're inclusive that way. The path along the way is what I really wanted to highlight today, is that it's not necessarily easy, but there's this constant attitude that you seem to have, this outlook, this mindset, that the challenge was more like a learning opportunity, right? Was there ever a time along the way that you said to yourself, no, turn around and go back?
I mean, in all honesty, there are lots of times where, you've had a long day. It's been a difficult day.
Yeah.
It hasn't gone necessarily the way that you feel that it should. And it's a good thing that it's bedtime, so you can push the reset button and start again the next morning.
It's probably a good reason that there is a bedtime.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think, as I said, my family has been very, very supportive of this, and and that's incredibly important, at least for me on a personal level. But I think it's also, there's always been lots and lots of members of the community that have also been really supportive.
Yes.
And doing the very best that we can and the best decisions that we can make is definitely something that you can always take comfort in. And if you always feel you've done that, then it makes those bad days better. Not perfect, but it makes them better. I don't think there's really been a time where I said, okay, that's it, I'm done. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
The days that we get to go out and, be at events and be with people and happy occasions and stuff, that's the stuff that people see all the time. And I enjoy that. I really do. I love working with people and being with people and so on. But the hard work happens, a lot of times behind the scenes. The good and the bad balance each other out, and there's a lot more good. And it's, as I said before, it's very exciting what Richmond Hill holds in its future. I really am excited to be a part of that and to lead some of the initiatives and work with great people to get there, and including our citizens. So that's the thing you need to focus on, right?
I got to say, like, in the time that you've been on council as mayor, I could see that one of your priorities was to create that cohesion, that chemistry level again, because you can accomplish so much more now that if you're not all going in different directions. Absolutely. I'd say that'd be a pretty big accomplishment.
Yeah.
What other sort of highlights do you have is that you would look back and say, hey, this is great? And these are not, I know you wouldn't say they're your highlights, they're Richmond Hill's highlights, right? But, what are you proud of Richmond Hill that we've been able to do recently?
Well, there's so much. I mean, I always tend to gravitate towards the things that are environmentally focused. They're the ones that give me the greatest personal pleasure. I know a number of years ago, over the last few years, we've signed a number of different promises and pledges and so on, starting with the Mayor's Monarch Butterfly Pledge and the Bee City Pledge, and now we've got the Bird Friendly Pledge. Right. I know that those don't sound like the most meaty pieces of legislation, but I'm really proud of those because they've made a real big difference. We've naturalized acres and acres and acres of land. We've created a great deal more public awareness of the importance of natural habitat for bees, pollinators, and monarch butterflies. And all of those things have made a difference. And you have to look carefully and know where to look to see the difference that it's made. But I know where those places are that were once, big green lawns that are now, naturalized. They're growing native species, and they're helping our environment. They're helping with flooding. They're helping with pollinating insects, which are incredibly important to our habitat. We're doing our part for to save monarch butterflies, and they're a real hallmark species in our fight for the natural environment. But those types of things really are important to us, and they're on the ground, and they're making a difference. But every time we pass a budget, for example, I always remember hearing from our treasurer that a budget is just a money reflection of what we value as a community. Again, I know that's not the thing that people think of right away when they think of the most exciting thing that we've done on council, but it really is important. Trying to balance all the needs of the community and keeping our taxes low is a real challenge, and it's becoming very, very, very difficult. But we need to work really hard on that and spend the time that we need to spend on it.
Yeah, I think it's really important for our viewers, people to understand that while you go through things, you have these things that are near and dear to you that you still pursue for for the benefit of the community, even if sometimes the entire benefit the community might not even recognize it or fully appreciate it. But to know that there are things that you can then give yourself fulfillment on, that we achieve these things.
Yeah.
So when's the last time you picked up the camera?
Well, actually, I opened the camera case the other day and all my batteries were dead. So it's obviously been a long time. You know what?
Still dabble with it like you want to.
Yeah. I mean,
No time for it.
I don't have the time, and I think in the days that, like before I was doing this professionally, I would run around in the forest with my camera. I mean, I was a kid at that time, and I took a great deal of pleasure, in just creating, capturing natural scenes and so on. Yeah, I'll get back to that someday. But for now, I very much appreciate the art that's happening. Actually, we just had finished a photo contest that we opened up to the citizens of Richmond Hill to photograph their favorite place in Richmond Hill as a part of the Richmond Hill 150 birthday celebration.
Right.
And I got to tell you, I was presented with all the entries on the day that the entry deadline closed and was completely inspired by the artistry and the beauty of what people had submitted. And we have over 100 entries that we're going to be, showcasing soon. And I have to tell you, I was a little bit jealous, and there was a little bit of I got to go out there.
They're getting good out there,
doing
these
those
kids.
things. So
yeah.
I've been inspired by that for sure.
What I found interesting on that was that at first you were only going to showcase how many, like 2 or 5 of them?
Oh yeah, but there were so many good.
And then you saw the rest of them, and you said,
"Yeah,
find the money. We got to show all of this."
Yeah,
that strikes me honestly to hear that about, like, there was a decision. It was like this was all that you were going to show at first. Then you expanded, and I think that's what I as a resident, as a part of this community, I really like about Richmond Hill is that we take time for things like that, and we value things like that, and that's really what makes it, like you said, you're building the city in a town, like a neighborhood, but you still want to hang on to that neighborhood feel where people look around for each other, they appreciate each other's work. And imagine, like, nobody would have batted an eye if you said, look, the rule said we were only going to take 10.
Yeah.
So too bad for the other 90 or whoever.
Yeah.
They would have understood.
Yeah.
But they should know that, you could have said that, but you included everybody in that. And that's appreciated.
Well, they were really good too. I mean, it was a very easy decision. But I agree with you. I mean, I think, Richmond Hill has always struck me as a place where, we are certainly growing as a larger city, but we I always want to make sure that we do whatever we can to continue with that intimacy that a smaller city can still have, right? And I think that's something that I've always seen about Richmond Hill. And it's a challenge. I mean, we're integrating lots and lots of new people into our community. Some of them have come from every single corner of the earth.
Yeah.
And we have a real opportunity in this is part of one of the things I find exciting is to be able to integrate all these different people and all of their different cultures and traditions and celebrations into our community. And like, I do joke sometimes that if you're savvy enough on different cultural celebrations, you can pretty much have a party 365 days a year in Richmond Hill without ever getting on an airplane.
Yeah.
Right. And it really is quite amazing. And what we have to learn from each other is truly amazing. Like, we are the world here in Richmond Hill, and the opportunities that presents itself are huge.
I was just thinking about that, when you talked about, you said federal, provincial, municipal, but then there's global too, right? I mean, that's what's going on.
Yes.
And the whole world congregates here, like lives here, really, in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so what goes on in the world, or all these cultures that are coming together, that presents, while it presents opportunity, there's tech, like you talked about, social media, development, housing that's affordable, and then environment.
Yeah.
And all of this has to be balanced out.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine a time that's been more challenging to this office, because you're sitting here, like you said, grassroots, and things are moving on a global level.
Yeah.
And it's like you really got to deal with that level of momentum right here, and keeping this. And then you also have parts of this neighborhood, this town, people have been here for decades. And love the fact that they can walk around and look at someone and say, hey, hello, and they know who those people's kids are and their birthdays.
Yeah.
And keeping that feel.
Yeah.
I really would like to see that feel stay. Yeah. I love the neighborhood.
Yeah, so
how do you plan on doing that?
Well, again, it gets back to this whole idea that we are going to grow. And we can't be afraid of change. I mean, staying the same forever, you're moving backwards, you're not moving forwards. But I think that, the plan in Richmond Hill, generally speaking, is that we have the opportunity to intensify, revitalize, and create really dynamic communities along the spines that we have, in particularly Yonge Street, and then in certain nodes along Yonge Street especially. And that's going to be where most of our growth is going to be in the coming years and decades. But and that's great because, I mean, it can be transit oriented. We can take advantage of the transit infrastructure that, has cost us as provincial and national taxpayers quite a bit. The subway is coming. I mean, it'll get here eventually. But all of that to say that I would like, as much as we can, to continue to maintain the established subdivisions that we have always valued in Richmond Hill as much as we possibly can. Now, there will still be some changes that happen in those subdivisions, but we do our very best to maintain the character, and it is not easy. There's a lot of pressures and things that need to happen in order to balance that, but that's our job, and that's what we need to have all hands on deck. And when I mean all hands, not just council.
Yes.
It needs to be the community. It needs to be stakeholders. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the overlying things right now that's important is affordability, right? We need places for our kids to buy their home and stay in Richmond Hill. We need places for people who are retiring and want to stay here but need to, unlock some of the equity in their house. They need a place to stay here. Newcomers, need a place to stay. I mean, the businesses that we have here in Richmond Hill need employees in all different wage categories, and it's way better. We can compete way more if we have those people, within walking distance or a short commute of their place of business. So all of these things have to be considered as we look to our growth. But, we've gone through an extensive official plan update, which we're getting towards the tail end of, and that will map out our physical growth into the future, plus our infrastructure needs, plus our park needs, amenity needs, fire and emergency service needs, all of that. So I'm excited.
That's good to hear that you're excited. That's to keep that excitement level. One of the things I remember we chatted on earlier was that you didn't believe in someone in this position staying on for many terms, and that there's this idea of that you espouse that it's good to have that change in the guard, change in perspective, update, refresh. So since you're not planning to say for yourself, you got the next chapter that's going to be coming, what is it that you would say if you were talking to somebody 10, 20 years from now in this seat? What would you say to them that you'd love to see connect from today till then?
Yeah, that's a good question. As a matter of fact, it's funny you say that because we were doing a time capsule.
Oh, you are?
I had to write a letter to the future mayor, so I kind of just did that.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think, technology is going to change. We were, in this letter, we were talking about maybe make reference to flying cars. I'm not sure that's ever going to happen. The Jetsons aren't fully here yet. But I think that in reflecting on writing that, the underlying factors of a great community, I can't imagine have changed ever and probably won't, right? I mean, it's still all about people. Again, referring to Dave, our late Mayor Dave Barrow, the quote that he has in Dave Barrow Square is, "It's all about community." And it always is all about community, and how we create those communities and how we create that sense of belonging and all of that. I can't imagine that those principles will really change. How we get there might change, but I would say that any leader now or in the future needs to have a firm understanding that they're there to serve the community. They're there to do what's best for the community in this day and age, but also in the future, right? Set up the community for success. And I don't think some of those basic fundamental things will change. I mean, how they communicate to the public, that'll change. How they interact with the public, that might change. But the things that they say and the things that they need to do to create a great community will probably stay fundamentally the same.
And so I guess this is then lastly, then what would you say to those people who are sitting there contemplating, hey, I'm just a whatever. What difference can I possibly make in this? And the path that you've taken is so relatable to them.
Yep.
You never saw yourself necessarily doing it. They don't see themselves right now doing it.
One of the things I think that's important is be an active participant in your community. And that's how I started too. Like I did a lot of volunteering and getting involved and being actively engaged in something, whether it be the soccer association because your kid plays soccer, the neighborhood organization, a neighborhood watch committee, some social club. I mean, it doesn't matter. Just get involved, get to know with, what's going on in your community, be active, read the news, be critical of the news, but be engaged because, the thing is in our democracy, I mean, there's the basics of like, you got to vote. That's kind of a basic fundamental thing. But I would also say that you really have to be informed. You should also really be informed when you vote. You need to be knowing what's going on in your community. Like it's better, a community and a democracy are always better when people aren't just all along for the ride, right? They're taking some part in driving the ship, and it can be it can be a small thing, it can be a big thing, it can be anything in the middle. But essentially that's, how I ended up getting here and being inspired to get here was that I've just always been really interested in what's going around me. And that's not to say everybody has to be an elected official. That's not everybody's path, and that's totally fine. But if that's the way you're wired and if that's where your future leads you, then take the opportunity. But if it's not, I mean, there's so many people in our community that I completely admire that are running the food bank, that are running a social club, that are coaches on baseball teams, that are part of their neighborhood watch group, that are, there's so many people doing so many great things in our community. And, we're there to lead and create policy to set the framework for the community. But those people are the ones that are making the magic happen in so many corners of our community. And I would encourage everybody to give as much of your time and your energy and your thought as you can to do that, because that all makes us stronger.
Thank you.
No, thanks, man.
I appreciate you coming out. And we've always had this this talk or this show on just the challenges people have on their way to wherever they're going, and clearly, like some navigate it seems smoothly, as they go through it, and others really, really struggle. They get stuck at a certain spot, and I got to say, I admire how you've. I got to also probably have Michelle come here one day and give us her perspective, right? Because she'll see a completely different angle on this. But really, to see the challenges that you face and how you just keep looking forward, and you keep drawing on what they might call like the transferable stuff, knowing that inside of you, hey, listen, I got everything I need right here to be able to just carry on doing what's being presented in front of me. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Talking about like the challenges and the opportunities and the wins of the city, and looking forward to seems like a great future we've got planned.
Yep, I agree. Thank you.